She thought her carefully chosen words would be enough. A few whispers, a polite complaint, and the man sitting beside her would be gone, removed quietly, without fuss, without anyone asking too many questions. For Patricia Langford, a woman, who had grown used to privilege shaping the world around her, it was supposed to be effortless. But as her plan unfolded, something unexpected happened. The man she wanted gone didn't flinch. He didn't explain himself or scramble to defend his right to be there. He didn't even acknowledge her accusations. Instead, with calm precision, he closed his laptop, slipped a hand into his pocket, and pulled out something that froze Patricia in her seat. A leather case, a flash of gold, an FBI badge gleaming under the cabin lights. In an instant, the balance of power shifted. Patricia's voice faltered. Passengers who had been whispering now leaned forward, their eyes wide. The flight attendants, tense and silent, stood waiting. The man's badge wasn't just proof of who he was. It was a mirror, reflecting the ugliness of what Patricia had just tried to do. And as that badge caught the light, Patricia realized her mistake wasn't going to stay between the walls of that airplane cabin. Because what happened next would not only unravel her composure, it would unravel her entire life. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Hidden Black Stories, where we share powerful, eye-opening narratives that reveal the struggles and triumphs of Black lives across the world. Now let's step back to where Patricia Langford's day began. Patricia glided through Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport with her designer luggage rolling neatly behind her, heels clicking against the polished floors. For years, her travel routine had been almost ritualistic. First class, flights only, champagne waiting, staff trained to anticipate her needs before she even spoke. Air travel to her wasn't a chore. It was proof of status, a bubble of exclusivity she believed she had earned, and one she guarded fiercely. She barely noticed the ordinary travelers around her, the families juggling toddlers, the students with oversized backpacks, the weary business flyers cutting through the crowd. They weren't her concern. Her focus was on the velvet rope of privilege, priority boarding, pre-flight cocktails, the hushed calm of first class. This was her world, predictable, controlled. But predictability shattered the moment she reached her row, settled comfortably. In the seat beside hers was a black man in a sharp navy blue suit, posture straight, laptop balanced effortlessly on his knees. His fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, the glow of the screen reflecting against his face. He didn't look up when she arrived, didn't acknowledge her presence. He simply continued his work with quiet focus, as if her arrival was irrelevant. For Patricia, that was the first strike. First class was not supposed to feel like this. She pressed her lips into a thin line as she placed her tote bag down with a little too much force, hoping he might glance her way, maybe even apologize for some unspoken offense. But he didn't. His composure was unshakable. That man was Daniel Stokes. On the surface, he looked like any other professional traveler. Neatly pressed suit, an air of confidence, the kind of presence that made it clear he belonged wherever he sat. But Patricia didn't see it that way. To her, his very presence was disruptive, an intrusion into the world she thought was hers alone. As the minutes ticked by, she couldn't focus on the luxury she usually relished. Not the wide leather seat, not the warm cloth handed out by the attendant, not even the chilled glass of sparkling water. Her attention kept drifting back to Daniel, the steady rhythm of his typing, the stillness in his posture, the quiet confidence radiating from him. It unsettled her. She shifted in her seat, adjusted her purse so it brushed against his armrest. No reaction. Cleared her throat once, then again louder. Still, no acknowledgement. To Patricia, silence wasn't neutrality. It was defiance. Her chest tightened with indignation. The script in her head was clear. She was supposed to feel comfortable, elevated, respected. But sitting beside Daniel, she didn't feel any of that. She felt challenged. and that was something she couldn't tolerate. Her thoughts began to spiral. She glanced around the cabin, scanning for allies. The flight attendants, busy helping passengers stow bags and prepare for takeoff, hadn't noticed her yet. But Patricia was determined to make them notice. She raised her hand ever so slightly, signaling to one of them with a polite smile painted across her face. From the outside, it looked like a harmless gesture, a simple passenger needing assistance. But inside, Patricia's head, a plan was already forming, a plan that, in her mind, would restore order. What she didn't know was that the steps she was about to take wouldn't just draw attention to Daniel. They would shine a spotlight on her, one so blinding that escape would be impossible, and, as the aircraft prepared to taxi toward the runway, Patricia's illusion of control was about to unravel in front of an audience far larger than the one she imagined. The seatbelt signs had barely lit when Patricia pressed her call button. A soft chime echoed overhead, subtle yet sharp enough to draw eyes from nearby passengers. Within moments, a flight attendant appeared, Emily Jacobs, polished and professional, her smile practiced and calm. Patricia greeted her with that same carefully constructed smile she used at charity luncheons and board meetings. The kind that suggested refinement but masked irritation. Leaning slightly toward Emily, she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial tone. "I think there's been a mistake." Emily tilted her head politely, tablet in hand. Patricia motioned, discreetly toward Daniel, her words carefully chosen to avoid saying out loud what she truly meant. To her, it was enough to suggest that something was wrong, that he didn't belong. Emily's eyes flicked down at her manifest, scanning quickly. Then she straightened, her tone warm but firm. "No mistake. Mr. Stokes is in the correct seat." That answer should have ended the matter, but Patricia couldn't let it go. Her lips tightened, her breathing shallow. She exhaled through her nose and shifted, the seatbelt tugging against her blouse. To her, Emily's calm dismissal wasn't reassurance. It was dismissal, the kind of dismissal she wasn't used to enduring. Daniel, still seated with perfect composure, hadn't said a word. His fingers hovered briefly above his keyboard, then resumed their steady rhythm. The glow of his screen illuminated his face in serene focus, as if Patricia didn't exist at all. That silence, the refusal to acknowledge her, stung more deeply than if he'd snapped back. Patricia's indignation grew heavier, pressing on her chest. She tapped her manicured fingers against her knee, louder this time, drawing the attention of a man across the aisle who pretended to check his phone, but lingered a moment too long. A woman 2 rows back leaned closer to her husband, whispering something under her breath. The cabin was noticing. Patricia pressed the call button again. The chime echoed once more, sharper this time in the quiet hum of the cabin. Emily returned, her smile intact but thinner than before. "Yes, ma'am? How can I help?" Patricia's voice carried an edge now, though she tried to soften it with forced politeness. "I'd like to change my seat." Emily raised her brows, slightly. "Are you uncomfortable? Is there a problem with the seat itself?" Patricia hesitated, because the truth wasn't something she could say aloud. Instead, she gestured faintly, her chin tilting toward Daniel. Her words dropped lower, careful, deliberate. "I just don't feel comfortable." Emily's professional smile faltered. For the first time, a thin crack appeared in her polished demeanor. She tapped quickly on her tablet, checking available seats. Her tone was apologetic but firm. "I'm afraid first class is full. The only open seats are in economy." Patricia's stomach twisted. Economy. As if she would ever. She forced out a laugh, brittle and sharp. "That won't work?" Emily's voice softened but carried a steel edge beneath it. "Then I'm afraid you'll need to remain in your assigned seat." The words stung. Patricia's cheeks warmed, as she realized passengers nearby were watching openly now, their gazes darting between her, Daniel, and the attendant. The performance of polite concern was crumbling. She wasn't the composed, reasonable traveler anymore. She was a disruption. And still, Daniel said nothing. No protest, no explanation, no attempt to defend himself. His silence became its own kind of power, a mirror reflecting Patricia's growing desperation. But Patricia wasn't the type to back down. Her mind raced. If asking politely hadn't worked, she would escalate. She pressed the call button again. This time, when Emily returned, her voice was sharper, her words clearer, and loud enough for more passengers to hear. "I need to speak to someone in charge." A hush fell over the surrounding rows. The businessman across the aisle raised his brows. A young woman subtly angled her phone upward, the lens catching the scene under the pretense of texting. The audience was forming. Emily's patience thinned, though her professionalism never faltered. "I'm the lead flight attendant, ma'am. How can I assist you?" Patricia's voice sharpened further, her jaw tight. "I don't feel safe." The words landed like a crack of thunder. Passengers shifted in their seats. Someone muttered, "Here we go again." Daniel's fingers stilled. He closed his laptop slowly, resting his hands on top of it. For the first time, his dark eyes turned, to meet hers, calm but unyielding. Patricia felt the weight of his gaze settle on her, stripping away the layers of control she had wrapped herself in. That single phrase, "I don't feel safe," was no longer about comfort. It was an accusation, an implication designed to provoke. And everyone knew it. The rising tension spread through the cabin like static electricity, each second pulling tighter. Patricia thought she was pushing toward victory, but in truth, she was stepping closer to a downfall she couldn't yet see. The air inside the cabin felt heavier now, every breath charged with unspoken judgment. Patricia sat taller in her seat, her voice trembling but determined, as if sheer persistence would force the universe to bend her way. "I'm telling you," she said louder now so that rows ahead and behind could hear. "I don't feel safe next to him." Gasps rippled across the aisle. A mother 2 rows up instinctively pulled her child closer, not out of fear of Daniel, but out of discomfort at the public accusation. A businessman shook his head slowly, muttering under his breath. Someone at the back shifted in their seat. Pulling out a phone more openly now, Emily, the flight attendant, remained steady, but her eyes flickered with unease. She knew how quickly accusations like this could spiral, how a single phrase could turn into a storm. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "you need to remain calm. Mr. Stokes has done nothing to—" Patricia cut her off, her voice sharper, shrill with indignation. "Then why are you ignoring me? Why won't you listen? I am a paying first-class passenger, and I should not have to sit here feeling threatened." Her words hung in the air like poison. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, as if weighing the cost of silence against the necessity of action. When he opened them again, there was no hesitation. With measured calm, he placed his laptop into his leather bag, zipped it closed, and set it neatly at his feet. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, as though rehearsed. Then slowly he reached into the inside pocket of his blazer. The passengers closest to him leaned forward unconsciously, their eyes narrowing, their breaths caught in their throats. Patricia's pulse quickened. For the first time, she felt a prickle of fear, because she had no idea what he was about to do. And then it happened. A wallet. A black leather case. He opened it with a practiced flick, and in the glow of the cabin, lights, a gold badge gleamed. The eagle, the shield, the unmistakable letters etched into the metal, FBI. Gasps erupted across the cabin. A few passengers audibly whispered, "Oh my God." The young woman with the phone lowered it in stunned silence. Emily's professional smile disappeared altogether, replaced by wide-eyed shock. Patricia's throat tightened. The words she had prepared, the next wave of her protest, died on her tongue. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm tone sliced through the tension with more weight than any outburst could have carried. Agent Daniel Stokes, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Counterterrorism Division. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's face drained of color, her manicured hands trembling against the armrest. Her world had shifted in an instant. The man she had tried to paint as suspicious, dangerous, and unworthy of sharing her space was not only innocent, he was someone entrusted with protecting the very country she claimed to feel unsafe in. Daniel's gaze never wavered. It wasn't anger that filled his eyes, but something colder. Disappointment. A quiet rebuke, more cutting than rage could ever be. Emily recovered first, her voice firm now, carrying authority instead of appeasement. Agent Stokes, thank you for identifying yourself. We sincerely apologize for the disturbance. The word apologize landed like a blow. Patricia's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her confidence, once overflowing, had evaporated. Around her, the cabin had turned into a silent jury. Passengers who had witnessed every second of the ordeal now stared at her with open disdain. Daniel closed his badge case and slipped it back into his pocket. He leaned back in his seat, folded his hands in his lap, and returned to silence, just as calm as before. Only now the silence belonged to him. Patricia, meanwhile, felt her carefully constructed image collapsing. She wasn't the polished, respected woman she thought herself to be. She was exposed, small, vulnerable, and for the first time, she realized that the damage was irreparable, not because of what Daniel had said, but because of what he hadn't needed to say. The climax had shifted everything. The man she tried to erase had revealed himself as someone whose very presence carried power and authority beyond her reach. And now, Patricia sat in the ruins of her own making, trapped at 30,000 feet with no escape from the consequences. The weight of silence pressed down on the cabin, thick and unrelenting. Patricia sat frozen, her knuckles white against the leather armrest, every pair of eyes burning into her like searchlights. She had always thrived on attention, at galas, on social media, even in the hushed exclusivity of first-class lounges. But this attention was different. It wasn't admiration. It was judgment. Her face flushed a deep crimson. She tugged at the sleeve of her silk blouse, smoothed her hair, tried to compose herself. But nothing she did could erase the memory of what had just happened. The gold badge, the ripple of gasps, the unmistakable shift in the air. Emily, the flight attendant, stood taller now, her composure sharpened by resolve. She leaned slightly toward Patricia, her voice low but firm. "Ma'am, I need you to remain seated for the duration of this flight. There will be no further disruptions." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Patricia nodded stiffly, the practiced smile she so often wielded refusing to return. She knew that any protest now would only sink her deeper. The jury of passengers had already delivered its verdict, and she had no defense left to offer. Meanwhile, Daniel remained exactly as he had been, calm, still, his hands folded neatly. The badge had returned to his pocket, but the memory of its gleam lingered in everyone's mind. He didn't gloat. He didn't glance at Patricia. He didn't need to. His silence carried more dignity than words ever could. The flight resumed, its rhythm. The engines roared as the plane climbed higher, drink carts rolled down the aisles, and the hum of conversation slowly returned. But the energy had changed. Where there had been suspicion and division moments earlier, now there was quiet solidarity. Passengers exchanged knowing looks, some shaking their heads in disbelief at what they had witnessed. Patricia stared out the window, her reflection staring back like a stranger. She replayed the moment in her mind on an endless loop. Her words, her certainty, the smug sense of control she thought she had, and then the reveal that shattered it all. She had tried to strip Daniel of belonging, but in doing so she had only stripped herself of credibility. For Daniel, the scene played differently. Years of experience had trained him to handle threats, to read situations, to calculate risks. Yet moments like this never lost their sting. He was used to the sideways glances at airport security, the whispered suspicions in hotel lobbies, the unspoken question that followed him into boardrooms. Does he really belong here? But sitting beside Patricia, her accusation cutting through, the cabin. He had felt the familiar weight of injustice pressing down. The badge had silenced it, but not erased it. Because he knew, deep down, that without that badge, the story might have ended very differently. And that thought was heavier than any victory could be. As the hours passed, Patricia shrank deeper into her seat. Every small kindness from the attendants, the refilled glass, the offered blanket, felt like pity. Every glance from fellow passengers felt like a reminder of her failure. By the time the plane descended toward its destination, the weight of humiliation had settled into her bones. She knew this wouldn't end when the plane landed. Some of those passengers had recorded the moment. It was only a matter of time before the world outside the cabin saw what she had done. When the wheels touched down, Daniel stood smoothly, retrieving his bag from the overhead compartment. His movements were calm, measured, unhurried, as though the storm that had raged midair had never touched him. But as he stepped into the aisle, his eyes flickered briefly toward Patricia. It wasn't anger. It wasn't triumph. It was something colder, sharper. A look that said, "You don't define me, not here, not anywhere." Patricia couldn't hold his gaze. She looked down at her trembling hands, her world smaller than it had ever felt before. As passengers filed out, some brushed past her without a word, others with deliberate sidelong glances. A few even offered Daniel quiet nods of respect. Each silent gesture carved deeper into the truth Patricia now had to face. The hierarchy she had clung to was an illusion, shattered beyond repair. When Daniel disappeared into the stream of travelers, the finality of it sank in. He didn't need to stay. He didn't need to fight. The truth had already spoken louder than anything she could muster. For Patricia, the flight would not be remembered as another first-class indulgence, but as the day she was exposed, publicly, undeniably, for what she was. And for Daniel, it was another reminder of the world he navigated daily. A world where the weight of suspicion followed him, but where dignity and truth remained his greatest weapons. The lesson of that flight: lives far beyond the cabin. It's a story about perception, privilege, and the dangerous power of assumptions. About how quickly prejudice can twist reality, and how, when challenged, it often crumbles under the weight of truth. So the question lingers. If Daniel hadn't been an FBI agent, if he hadn't carried that badge, how differently might this story have ended? It's a question we all need to ask ourselves, because in a just world, no badge should be required for dignity, respect, and belonging.